Good evening, each and every single one of you. How is it going? Oh, I am also looking at this screen and realizing that there is no Tumblr anymore. I should probably get that fixed. Also, these are not guests. Screen, why are you broken? Apparently, I've updated everything but this screen. That's okay. You know what? We're gonna do it this way. Hang on. Minor problems. Oh god. Minor problems. Minor problems for a stream. It's par for course. It happens all the time. These are not my hosts. These are not my guests. There. Enjoy the black box at the bottom. Not branded. Not branded. Just got through telling somebody that you always brand your shit. And I broke branding. Well, welcome to episode 4 of whatever it is that we're doing on this. There are no guests this evening. It's kind of just going to be me kind of rattling on about a few things. The main reason I didn't bring anybody on for this is because, one, I forgot, and I'm going to make up excuses as to why I didn't bring anybody on, but I'm going to say that it's for the reason that I had plenty to talk about as it is, and I actually do. We've got a good number of things to discuss and chat about tonight on this episode, so it's not totally the end of the world. But yeah, tonight is going to be kind of a one of those laid-back streams. It's going to be kind of powered by you guys. Few streams happening tonight. It's going to be kind of bizarre, but I appreciate you guys taking the time out of your busy days, or not so busy days. You know, maybe you're not one of those people that has a busy day, but I appreciate you taking the time out anyway. But hello, welcome everybody to episode 4, Cold War Implications and Impact is what we're going to be talking about tonight, amongst a few other things. And the few other things I have to talk about tonight kind of got heaped on at the last minute. It was kind of one of those things to where someone brought these things up to me, and I thought to myself, you know what, that's actually a really good thing to talk about. I'd like to talk about that. I'd rather not wait to talk about it. So I figured that we would do so tonight and have a little bit of a Q&A session. So you guys would get a chance to actually prod at me, talk to me, whatever it is that you guys necessarily want to do. There's going to be a little bit of participation on your guys' part tonight too. I've got a few questions that I'm going to be asking you guys, so don't worry, you're not going to get graded on it. But there's a sorta quiz tonight. It's not a quiz at all. I don't know why I'm saying it's a sorta quiz. Maybe it's because it sounds scarier, but yeah, that's kind of the agenda tonight. I'm gonna start this out kind of with wait, but I didn't study. That's fine. It's perfectly fine. Because I didn't study either, if it makes you feel any better. But I want to start this tonight. I don't typically get a lot of messages on Twitch, and I'm gonna address this as if somebody's in chat. They probably aren't in chat. Just off of what research that I've done, because anytime I get any kind of communication in, I always do a check to make sure that the person that is communicating with me is an actual person, and two, that they're not, trying to get me to go out and buy gift cards for them or something. But I always do a check, and this individual did reach out and message me and sent me a few messages here, and I'm kind of going to pick through them, so I won't mention who you are. I won't mention username. That's for you to come forward and say if you ever decide that you want to say it. But this person says that I'm similar to you in that I'm stuck in a weeb phase, but also am a History BA graduate MA student, which is absolutely fantastic. I love knowing that there are more people like this. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. But they're looking for ways to bring history into streaming, wanting to do a weekly history show or something like that, but struggling to come up with an idea or way that will allow people who come in and out while still knowing what is going on and helping viewers stay on track. So I responded to this already, but it's something that it's honestly, this person has twitched more than I have. Is that, can I use that word? Is that a word that's usable? Twitched? Well, they twitch more than I do. I don't know if they necessarily twitch more than I. They've been around longer. They have a greater following than I do. So receiving something like this, where I'm being asked this, frankly, was kind of flattering in a certain way, and it was really, really awesome to see that there was another person that was kind of in the same boat that I was. But basically, to that person, I'll reiterate again, don't do what I just did earlier when I started the stream and I had the wrong branding on the stream. Yeah, don't do that. And generally, you won't have a problems with your viewers being lost or people who are just coming in being lost. I don't think anybody, and I looked through all my VODs, and I've never seen a message where it said, "Hey, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what you're talking about." Generally, people who are coming in have a pretty good sense, a pretty good idea of what we're talking about. And if they don't, that's one of the things where you just want to keep an eye on chat. So I do an okay job with this. I do less of a good job with it when I'm doing the presentation streams than when I'm doing streams like this. And one of the problems that I see on the horizon someday, if we ever get to that point, is if we are doing so well to where chat's moving at 1,000 miles an hour, the risk that I might actually forget a question or overlook a question, or somebody who's really interested in something decides to speak up, and they might get overlooked, and it can be rather damaging to somebody's self-esteem if they get overlooked. So that's one of the things that I've always been really worried about, and one of the big reasons that I want to make sure that I'm always talking to you, chat, just because I want to make sure you guys know that I am looking, I am paying attention. If I ever miss something, it's not because I'm deliberately ignoring you, it's because I'm trying to move forward with whatever I'm saying, and I can't stop and say everything that I want. But I hope I do a good job of reminding you all that I appreciate you engaging and talking and discussing things in chat. It's always one of the things that makes me the happiest when we give these streams. And I mentioned this to Kevin after our last historic affairs presentation. I said one of the things that I love the absolute most, and he agreed with me on this because he actually brought it up before I did, is when the chatters are engaging in a conversation in addition to what is going on stream. And we saw that with our Unit 731 presentation. I've seen it come up with several of the aviation history presentations that we've done, and it's one of the coolest things I've ever seen on Twitch on this channel. So when people do that, it's absolutely phenomenal and absolutely fantastic. I want to dig into another one of these points here, and I know there's only a couple of you here, but I'm going to talk to the VOD people here too, as well. And in addition to some of the older people who don't have Twitch accounts that I know are actually on here, but don't have Twitch accounts so they don't get logged as viewers, I want to ask you guys, how many times have you ever had an interest in something where you have felt maybe a little bit insecure or ashamed or shy to maybe present yourself as somebody who has a particular interest or a particular hobby, whether that be around your family, in your place of work, or by association within your profession. Um, has anybody ever had that? And I'm seeing that Yang is apparently, I'm calling Yang out like that. So, one of the reasons that I want to bring this up is I had this. And I'm sure that this person will watch the VOD. I'm sure Kev is either watching currently or he will watch this later. But I have had this around Kevin, and a lot of it is psychological, right? It's in our heads. We get this feeling and impression in our minds that we are in a certain environment, we should like certain things or do things in a certain way. But really where this comes up is this comment about that starts here, stuck in a weeb phase, but also history BA and graduate MA, which the history BA and graduate MA student, that's phenomenal. And you all have heard me talking to Bonnie. Bonnie is a perspective on perspective PhD track. Kevin is also a master's student as well, which is phenomenal. It's great and fantastic, and I encourage people. But we get in this mindset of we have to have this certain kind of projection of kind of stone-facedness. And I'll give you an example of this. Tattooed Historian. When I rated Tattooed Historian for the first time, one of the things that had concerned me is actually came when the message came back that I'll return the favor sometime, which was fantastic. But it was also something where I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is a person who has who commands an awful lot of respect in the field. He's got interest in historical gaming, and he seems to fit the bill of historian maybe a little bit more than I might in certain ways, shape, or forms. And then came last week, I think it was last weekend, last Final Fantasy VII stream, and he raided, and a bunch of his people that came off of his raid stuck around, and we were having conversations about RPGs. And it occurred to me then, as it's occurred to me before, but it never really stuck, that is not a necessary worry that I had. It's not necessary for you to be concerned about your hobbies or your interests, because your hobbies and your interests, they're your hobbies and your interests. They define you. They define who you are outside of your profession. And they kind of shape your personality and who you are and things like that. So one of the things that I was always worried about is the fact that, hey, I used to be really into the anime and games stuff, and then I got with my ex-girlfriend and she kind of beat it out of me, and I'm now trying to get back into it because it was something that I really enjoyed. But getting back into it has always been this really weird kind of vibe, this really weird and bizarre feeling. And then going into a professional workspace, like working for the Army, it always really seemed like, well, if you're working in the Army, that you don't have time for this. Those kinds of things don't seem to mesh. But if you look at a lot of the stuff that you find on like WTF moments, there was a great post even today from West Point Academy, and I kid you not, if you go and you look up on Facebook West Point, today they did a final exam and they allowed students to actually dress up in costumes, and I shit you not, there were a bunch of them that were running around in Naruto outfits. That kind of stuff, though, it defines who you are as a regular person. And I feel that as you get into the older generations, or as you kind of set yourself up and get hung up on this word professional, you lose track of, what it is to kind of be an individual, and things like that. So I would just remind all of you, and I have to remind myself all the time, so please don't feel like, well, THK's got it taken care of. No, THK does not have it taken care of, guys. In fact, he very much does not have it taken care of. So that's what I want to make sure that I get across, is that you are always owning your hobbies, your interests, and you feel good about the things that you're doing. Suzu, hello, good to see you. I'm happy that you could make it this evening. But yeah, fantastic, good to see you. Those were the kind of the pre-things that I had this evening. I mean, I have a few other things here too, but some of these I kind of wanted to go into some of these on a different stream, because there's another individual here that was asking about tips or tricks for getting into the historical field, and it's like, So I had some people make fun of me when I first got into history. This is a great story, and anybody here who is familiar with the History Channel, which is now known as the Ancient Aliens Channel, is just gonna roll their eyes at me. So I apologize in advance. When I first went into undergrad, I had a really nasty hankering for watching nothing but American Pickers. What was it, American Restoration or something? The Las Vegas guys and Pawn Stars. And what was even worse is that American Pickers, I live where the American Pickers are from. Like, their shop is like 2 miles away from my house. So it was always really weird and kind of, ugh. Actually, I feel a little bit dirty now talking about it. But those are not history shows. I mean, some dude going into somebody's garage and then heckling them out of a, like $1,000 sign for $70. I'm not really sure what history content you're getting maybe out of that, but that's where a lot of my that's where everybody used to think that my historic background came from. It wasn't. We'll save that part for another stream. But y'all didn't hear me come here to hear me talk about THK's vast past of debauchery and all that good stuff. But getting into love of history has to start somewhere. Yes, it absolutely does. So I'll tell you where history for me came in, and it was actually a love fraught out of tragedy in a sense. So when I was in, okay, we will go back a little bit, because I have this one subject, and then there's my soapbox. I can get on my soapbox. And I'm sure Yang really wants to hear me go on my soapbox. She's heard me on my soapbox enough. I don't think she needs to hear me on my soapbox any more than I've already been. But my interest in history came out of my 7th grade social studies teacher. And I can tell you for sure that my focus in history probably comes from that point too. So the crash course here is that when I was 3 years old, I saw a B-2 fly over. It was Spirit of America. That plane had been declassified for 22 days. 22 days it had been declassified, and it flies over the air show in town here. This is 1993. And I made the decision at that moment, okay, the history baby, he's 3 years old, history baby's going to be a pilot. Then history baby got older and couldn't be a pilot because history baby doesn't have good enough eyesight. So history baby had to figure out other things, but in the process of that, he had a 7th grade social studies instructor who was very much into the Cold War era. You guys who have been in here know where my focus is, but I'll inform Suzu, because I think Suzu has been in here less, or is new, that my focus, my thesis, is actually in, I have a couple. So one of them is in Cold War aviation and avionics advancement. The other one is in Cold War U.S. Army logistics from Vietnam through ODS. So one of those is a labor of love interest. The other one is work says I have to know it. But during that time, that established the baseline kind of history for me. And then by the time we get into me, finally going off and I drop out, in the end of 7th grade, that's the last time that I'm in school until I, get the GED when I'm 16, go right into undergrad from there. And by the time I get into undergrad, it's just like, yeah, I'm pretty sure history is the thing for me. But you have to remember, I went to undergrad in 2012. Anybody tell me what happened in 2012? That was a big deal? Well, rather, what didn't happen in 2012 that should have been a big deal if it had happened? The world was supposed to end. It was supposed to end. So, 2012 phenomena, right? One of my instructors, who at the time was on an excavation survey with Dr. Ko. And Dr. Ko was involved with the excavation of sites. He had written a slew of books. He did the Maya Code, everything down in Teotihuacan. He was working up through Copan, Palenque. He was doing excavation of all those sites. And there was a story that at one point they had, neighborhood kids that were always running around and kind of at the excavation sites. But one morning, a whole bunch of those kids did not show up. And they tried to figure it out. And as they're leaving the site one day, they pass a huge funeral procession. What's the funeral procession for? 6 of those kids actually had committed suicide. And the reason that they had done it is because they didn't want to live through the 2012 phenomena. And that is an example to me of why bad history is super duper bad and why it's so important. So you don't have mix-ups and things like that that can actually cause people to have destructive tendencies or things like that, because it does happen. It does happen an awful lot. So. Oh, yes, it's a fickle thing. Moving off of that uplifting note, chat, I love you. Don't go anywhere. Don't leave me. Don't you leave me. This is the chillest history stream we've had in a while too, by the way. So I wanted to pull up something here because this is also really interesting. So I actually received a new copy of JMH today. For those of you who don't know what JMH is, this is the Journal of Military History. I've been a field member now since last year of I've been a member for a while. But this one actually comes out of the January 2021. The January 2021 print. There goes my chat, being all goofy again. But one of the articles in here, and this is relevant to what we're going to discuss here now, is by David Fitzgerald. It's called Warriors Who Don't Fight. Warriors Who Don't Fight. The Post-Cold War United States Army and Debates Over Peacekeeping Operations. So the big focus here that Fitzgerald is making is discussing things that pertain to the transformation of the U.S. Army from being one kind of peacekeeper to another. So what do I mean by being two different types of peacekeepers. Well, you have to kind of think about what that term peacekeeper means. And what Fitzgerald is arguing here is that there's a transformation of what peacekeeping means. And I'll read you the abstract here verbatim. This article examines post-Cold War debates over the U.S. Army's participation in peacekeeping operations. Peacekeeping, and this is what I just said, meant different things to policymakers, Army leaders, public intellectuals, and those who served on such missions. Correct. It goes on. Army leaders were generally not enthusiastic about these operations, but recognized they were indicative of future trends. And boy, is that true in a big way. Wait till Bosnia pops up in the 1996 timeframe, or Hurricane Katrina, or freaking the Kosovo War, right? 1999. That is a major peacekeeping operation that we're having to transform needs and adapt to. Peacekeepers accepted the role even if they struggled to understand how to navigate the gray zone between peace and war. Political commentators sought to use peacekeeping missions to advance their own causes. Participants in these debates articulated not only their thoughts on peacekeeping, but radically different visions of what they wanted the American soldier of the 21st century to be. So, chat, those of you who know me, you know I work for the Department of Defense. You know that I'm privy to a set of information. One of the things that I do is I watch things. I'm involved in things and I watch things. And humanitarian crises make up a large portion of defense activities when it comes to use of the Army and things like that. One of the comments that I've made in the past, and one of the parallels that I've drawn, is that in the United States, we like to treat our military like it's a Swiss Army knife. It can do anything. It can do everything, but it's expensive to do everything. And one of the problems that always comes up is defining this line between a peacekeeper that is there for humanitarian and a peacekeeper that is there for defense. They are both peacekeepers. And that's what Fitzgerald is arguing about here, is that they are both peacekeepers, but in what extent, what limit, and what context. And that's really what transforms from that Cold War era to post-Cold War era. So let's think of the engagements that the U.S. Army, scratch that. Let's think of the engagements that the U.S. military has been involved in since the fall of the Berlin Wall. We've had, we'll go ahead and we'll start from Operation Desert Storm, ODS, and ODS-2, which is Desert Shield, or rather I think it's the reverse is true. So we've had that. We've had a humanitarian crisis in Bosnia. We had the refugee crisis with Algeria and the Kosovo War. There was Operation Desert Fox, which was the air campaign that was launched against Iraq under the administration of Bill Clinton in 1998. There was the subsequent War on Terror that breaks out in 2001. We start with Enduring Freedom. We include Operation Iraqi Freedom, which eventually becomes Operation New Dawn in 2010, I believe. So these are all the engagements. What's common through all these? They're all counterinsurgency operations or humanitarian operations. So humanitarian operations, Haiti, 1994-95. You have Tomodachi, which is the response to the Fukushima earthquake. It's a major transformation. When you think of all the operations that are out there, they really don't match the context of what we see during the Cold War. So when you're thinking about things during the Cold War, you're thinking of things like the Cuban Missile Crisis. The world was literally 10 seconds away from total annihilation at any given time. You're thinking of things like the Vietnam War, active involvement in an actual combat zone where it's a mass amount of insurgents against a mass amount of army troops. Or you're thinking about maybe the Malaysian emergency, or things like that. There's the Malayan emergency, excuse me. It's a very different kind of atmosphere. And we've talked about this before in one of these lectures, to where we have a very different assessment today of what it means to be engaged in a conflict from what it used to be. What do I mean by that for those of you who did not catch the last talk? Okay. What I mean by that is really simple. It doesn't mean that things today are better or worse than how they used to be when it comes to talking about military engagements and how military history is perceived. What it means is that we have changed what is bad and worse. What is defined as bad and worse. So what is bad today? Well, you could argue that, I'll just put it out there, a good example of this: soldier is killed at Fort Drum. As an example, a soldier is killed at Fort Drum. That is bad. Worse, convoy attacked by an IED followed by an insurgent guerrilla attack in Iraq. Okay, that's a convoy. How many dead? 10 to 15. It's pretty bad. Or rocket strike against coalition forces. We hear about that fairly periodically. Okay, that's bad to worse today. And yeah, that's pretty bad. But what was bad to worse yesterday? Well, bad to worse yesterday. Let's start with the bad. The bad yesterday is a ship convoy sunk because of a problem with one of the ship's rudders. 50 of the 375 sailors were able to survive that on their way over to Vietnam. Okay, that's pretty bad. That's pretty bad. What's worse? The My Lai massacre. Okay, that's a lot worse. Men, women, and children, an entire village burned to the ground. Or an attack, an offensive, the Tet Offensive, for example. It's a lot worse. It's a much different picture that we're painting. If you go back even further to World War II, you're talking about bad being hundreds of soldiers lost versus tens of thousands of soldiers lost. So we live in a very different kind of world, a very different kind of society today from what we used to. But those are the kinds of examples of how things have changed to a great deal when you are looking through the annals of military history from the Cold War era and you're comparing them to now. That's where things that are bad to worse and good change. They change kind of at that fall of the Berlin Wall. They change there. It's no longer the same thing that it used to be. Now, one of the other things that I've always found interesting about all this is how people talk about history. When you're comparing things of Cold War proponents to modern day proponents. So I had a page pulled aside here in Rick Atkinson's Crusade. And I'm going to try and find this page again because I was an idiot and I didn't bookmark it like I had thought, and I don't think that I'm going to be able to find it right away. But if anybody ever has a chance, check out Rick Atkinson's Crusade. It's a fantastic read on Operation Desert Shield and Desert Storm. But what Atkinson does is he tries to tell a post-Cold War conflict. He tries to relay it in a way that reads like a Cold War conflict. Okay? And he does a great job of it, too. And for people who are studying that era, it's going to make a lot of sense. However, I watched as almost all of my classmates tore this book apart. Why did they tear it apart? He's too casual. What do you mean by that? Well, he's too casual about the casualties that are happening in there. He's too casual about the assets that are being lost. He's too casual about this. He's too casual about that. Some of these people were individuals who are currently serving in the U.S. military. People who have been in since 2008, 2007, 06, 05. And one of the things that I thought was interesting that my instructor pointed out is, well, I'll actually put it out like this. Son, you've gone through a reset, haven't you? Yes, sir, I have. Okay? We didn't have reset. We didn't have drawdown. We didn't have Prepo. We didn't have War Reserve stocks. We didn't have this. We didn't have all of those things. This was a normal day. It was a normal day in the 1990s, late 1980s, 1990s military. Really and truly, at the end of the day, it was the exact same thing we've always done with less of a turnover than any of the previous conflicts that we had been in. Now, that being said, there were plenty of people, and I was one of them, by the way. I was one of these people who jumped up here, and I had to have my little nudge in this. I said, okay, but what did we learn about counterinsurgency? He didn't have a response for that, because I think that was the one thing he wanted us to actually get from reading this book, is that our counterinsurgency tactics hadn't really changed in the U.S. military, but instead there were all these students that were focused on this amount of money invested, the amount of lives lost, which I will remind you was not super big in comparison to a lot of the things that we actually had seen up to that point. But Atkinson was telling the story as if it was a Cold War story. And Gaddis does a great job of this. John Lewis Gaddis, when he's talking about things in Cold War perspective, he's like, listen, what you're going to have to realize is things were on a different scale. They weren't the same scale that you are probably thinking of today. It wasn't a thing of where a terrorist bombed a bunch of stuff and moved on. It wasn't a thing of where you had insurgents that were, in every nook and cranny. There was a real fundamental change in the atmosphere which changed the scale of how you look at things. And that's what Gaddis does. And that's what Atkinson tries to bring that into when he's talking in Crusade. Now, on the opposite side of this, I have A.J. Bacevich's Penatomic Era here in my hand. I have used this. If any of you caught my Atomic Annie presentation that I did, when did I do that? When did we do Atomic Annie? Yang, help. I don't remember when I did it. It was in 2020 sometime, I remember that much. Anyway, but when we did the Atomic Annie talk, a lot of what Bacevich's text was based on comes from that. He's looking at things from an atomic artillery perspective. So when we were talking about a different scale, it was also a different mindset. How was it a different mindset? Bacevich's entire document, which again I am holding right here in my hand, is discussing how the military was going to use atomic weapons as a defensive mechanism, not an offensive mechanism. In September 2020, that looks about right. Thank you, Yang. And I think the best part about this book, too, is that right on the cover is a Davy Crockett, an M21. And for those of you who don't remember what the Davy Crockett was, that was literally an atomic bazooka. So I'm gonna have this recoilless gun on my buddy downrange. I'm gonna fire the thing while he's driving as fast as he can before me, jump in the bed of this truck while it's still moving, and we're still both gonna die from radiation poisoning. But it was a very different mindset. And we have to be careful. We have to be very careful. I've drilled this into you guys so many times when talking about history, and I'm going to keep doing it every time we have one of these talks. History is full of biases, and you can fall into one of those pits like that. Just like that. It is scary. It's a scary field to be in when you realize that your whole entire perspective on something can be skewed just by taking a wrong turn. However, a disciplined historian, you got it made. You got it covered. So, but, you know, it's the things that we deal with. That's true really of any field. But people like to abuse history more than a lot of the other fields that are out there, unfortunately. It's kind of sad. See, this is why I would normally have a guest on, because then they could be just like, well, THK, you're full of shit. History is a symphony of melodies, and sometimes we think we're listening to country when it's actually metal. Yeah. Or sometimes it's bluegrass music instead of country music, or rockabilly, or something like that. It is. You can really... There's really a fine line sometimes with a lot of this stuff. And that's one of the reasons why it's so important to keep history kind of in those open fields of discussion, because oftentimes, more than not, people forget things, and they're not doing it. Here's the thing that I want to convey. Sometimes people say wrong, like provide and present wrong history, not because they're trying to mislead you, because they've legitimately forgot. History is a massive field, and one of the things that I've always, and will continue to always say, is that it's in everything. It's in everything and everyone, and that's a lot to keep track of. Now, that's another reason also why when people say, well, you're a historian, you should know when... I'll just throw out, you should know who came after Pope Sextus the First. Yeah, I'm not that kind of historian, okay? A historian doesn't necessarily know the orders of the popes. They don't know the orders of the kings and queens of England. They don't know, we don't necessarily know those things. We could be historians across the board. Now, I can tell you right now, the absolute order of the logistics commands in the U.S. Army. And I guarantee you, if you ask another historian that question, they're probably not going to be able to give you the answer. I can tell you the exact order of how familial weapon systems design came across. I can guarantee you that there's probably plenty of other U.S. Army weapons historians that are probably not going to know the answer to that question either. So, be careful. Oh, you're a blank name, obscure fact. That is, yeah. Right on, Suzu. Fantastic. I understand that it is very late for you across the pond, so thank you for stopping in. And yeah, check out the VOD. We've got a few more streams tonight, so you'll get a few more notifications, but it's okay. Have a good rest. Yeah, and Yank, that brings up a point too that I've said before too. Oh, you're a historian? Name every year. Well, I mean, that doesn't really, convey exactly what I'm trying to say, but it's one of those things where it's like, no, because I mean, you could name every year and you're still leaving something out because we don't know how far back we're going. I mean, do we want to go to, freaking Venus of Willendorf, 20,000 BCE, or do you want to go back, to the Advent when, we have remains dated to? What are you looking for? It goes into some of those things, and it's really complex, and it's a really awkward position to kind of throw a historian in. It's kind of like if you are a doctor, like if you're a medical doctor, and you're just like, well, why can't you perform the open heart surgery? You are a doctor in a lab coat. Ma'am, I'm a chiropractor. I'm pretty sure I don't want a chiropractor performing my open heart surgery. I'm pretty sure I don't want a brain surgeon doing the freaking orthopedics that I need. I'm pretty sure I don't need a brain surgeon for that. So it's one of those things where people really need to take that step back sometimes. And by the same token, historians have to take that step back sometimes. We have to be able to take that step back to recognize and put things into perspective in a grand scale of exactly how significant an event is in the grand scheme of history. We also have to do that in the perspective of the time and era that we're in. For example, this is relevant. This is relevant, and everybody that's going to watch this VOD and everybody who's in here is going to know and understand what I'm talking about when I say this. We're going to use COVID-19 as an example for this. Is COVID-19 a tragedy? Yes. Yes, it is. It's a very real tragedy, and people are not properly taking it seriously. Is it unprecedented? Depends. Is it unprecedented for a lot of us who are alive today? Yes. The answer is yes, it is. Is it unprecedented in a historical context? No. No, it is not. Is the resistance that we're dealing with a lot of the people who are refusing mask mandates, that are refusing gathering mandates, that are bitching and moaning about wanting to go out and do stuff and get things back to normal, and people who are just like smuggling their ways out to do all this stuff, is that unprecedented? In the grand scheme of history, it isn't. If you go back just 100 years, it was the exact same thing. The disappointing thing about all of this is that if you go back 100 years, it was the exact same thing. Those of you who have any iota of history will know that ridiculously overused saying that everybody likes to use whenever something goes wrong, or whenever they can see a parallel line drawn from a current event to a past event. Don't learn from history. You're going to make the same mistakes. You're going to repeat it. That's what happened with COVID. In the grand scheme of things, is COVID worse than the Spanish flu? Currently, no. It has the potential. However, is it going to feel as bad? Yes, it's going to feel as bad. It's going to feel as traumatic, as damaging, as destructive. It's going to feel that way. And regardless of what a historian says, that's not going to change the psychology of the matter. That for those of us who are alive today, we have nothing in our personal experience, which is how we perceive the magnitude of things, to compare it to. Therefore, it is the worst pandemic in our experience, in our personal histories. On the contrary side, we also need to keep in mind that we need to not oversell things and overreact to things. This did not happen, in my opinion, in the COVID-19 case. We didn't take it seriously enough at all, period. There were individuals, however, in social media largely, imagine that, who took it too seriously, who did take it to that extreme, who didn't put it in the context of history that they themselves were quoting. We have to do a better job about that as well. don't learn from history, or are you saying folks don't learn from history? I'm saying folks tend to not learn from history. We like to quote it a lot, but we don't always learn from it like we're supposed to. So that's what I was getting at. But that kind of also ties into that Cold War era component. And one of the reasons that I was always so fascinated in the Cold War era was explicitly because that's when everything changed. Things weren't the same anymore. And people are saying that about today too. I'm one of those people. I spent, I think, a good 20-25 minutes the other night sitting at the dinner table with my mom after we had dinner, talking about all the stores that used to be in town and how they're not anymore. Talking about the things that I used to do when I was little that nobody even thinks about doing anymore. We tend to do that. We are reflecting on our own history when we do that. But it's a defining line in an era that has changed. And the people who actually struggle with this the most are the people who are born and raised on those gray lines that define two different kind of generational identifiers. So I tend to think that the mid 1940s through about 1953 is the gray line between what I like to call the world gets connected. The birth of globalization happens between this is very rough, very rudimentary, but this is how I simplify things. So the birth of globalization in my mind happens between 1900 and about 1947. If you were born between about 1945, born or raised between 1945 and 1953, you were in that line to where things seem strange. You seem further removed from the generation that you're moving into than the generation that you were born just after. So, for example, about 1990 to 2000, that's when I was born. I was born in there. So I'm going to be right there and tell you. It's the generation where we change from not being connected by the internet to being literally connected 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, with a vast amount of information that is always at our fingertips, yet we, for some reason, are getting dumber. I was born in the 90s. I was born in 1990, alright? And I've never felt like I belonged in either one of those eras because I was born in that gray area, that 1990 to 2000 area, because I'm reflecting back and I'm remembering how simple things used to be. And sometimes with as great and as awesome as some of the new things seem like in the, year 2021, the simplicity of 1994 just seems incredible to me. Or the simplicities of how people seem to act in 1987, astounding, incredible, absolutely incredible. And we need to stop and think about things like that. That's why I think the Cold War is especially interesting, though, because it sits right in the middle of all that. Some of the biggest leaps in technology happened during that era. We have the advent of atomic technology. We have the advent of, the jet engine really comes into its own. We have computers that are starting to come onto the scene. We have the internet that comes onto the scene. We have advancements in psychology, advancements in medical research. We have so many different things that are happening in the Cold War era that have profound impacts on where we are today. That's where my interest really comes from with the Cold War. Nothing like Nothing like an era full of a backdrop of atomic weaponry to get you excited. But I digress, chat. Chaotic definitely understanding this? I imagine so. I would imagine that anybody probably over the age of 22, 23 probably understands this, not just from the perspective that they fit into that age bracket, but because the further back you go into it, the more I'm sure that you understand. Some of us have these really conflicting feelings about, are we better off today? Yes, but also maybe no. It's a very weird kind of sensation. So, chat, I am going to ask you if you have questions. Do you have questions? Have you ever had a question for a historian? Chaotic, you had some great questions that first episode, so I'm going to ask if you have any more. If you guys have any other things that you want me to look at. I'm also sifting through here to see if anything's coming up. Another PSA too, by the way. Korean War. It is continuing the 70th anniversary of the Korean War right now. That is through 2023. So, yes, I'm totally putting you on the spot, Chaotic. It's okay. It's alright. And I'm toying around right now with layout ideas. We're going to be going through an update to how all of the streams look. That is coming. I just haven't had the time to really sit down and do what I wanted to do with it. So I apologize in advance, but that is in a state of flux. So please don't feel free to heckle how things have broken this last stream. No, not that. No, not that. There we go. Sorry, my music list was messing with me too. Well, later on tonight, we do have the Final Fantasy VII stream. And then after that, we actually have a favorite stream. Yang is actually going to be joining me on call for that one. So we'll be doing a whole bunch of stuff come that stream. I think then we might go ahead, might wrap it up. I know it's a couple of minutes early. It's not a big deal. I'll take what I can get because it's a long evening. Ethics and Conservation. Big Rev Kev is going to be back with us for that presentation that is happening on 21 May. That one's going to be a real humdinger, and I have a feeling there's going to be a few of you that are going to be really upset during that presentation. Please just understand that there's a lot of different ways of addressing historic preservation and conservation. And there's a certain line that comes with ethics. We're going to be talking about that in that stream. We're going to be getting back to the Spiritual Connection presentations. That's going to be coming in May. I wanted to get back to them, yet this month, but it just is not going to work out. Most of that has to do with the restoration of work schedules and things like that. I want to have open reign to kind of breathe a little bit more than I have been. After that, on the 4th of June, we'll be doing a presentation called Valkyrie. There is a chance that might be getting simul-streamed, just because there is a celebration that's actually happening around the Valkyrie program, and that presentation might be involved in that, so we'll wait and see how that goes. There is a new presentation series that is out there on the horizon. I'm currently working with Kevin on that one. As soon as we have more information, we're going to get with you guys on that. But a lot of that is going to be us sharing some of our mastery program research. So we'll see how that goes. I'm still kind of feeling that one out. I actually haven't even really pitched it to him yet, but there's a few things out there that I'm working on getting up on the boards. If you have a suggestion for a history topic that you want me to actually tackle at some point, hit me with it either on Discord or in that link that you see up there on the screen. You can always pester me that way. And we'll be back then tonight with the Final Fantasy VII Remake. I think... What do I have to do yet tonight? Oh yeah, we just met Aerith, didn't we? I'll figure it out. I'll figure it out. Yeah, that's gonna be a disaster and a half. With that, let's see. Is Tattooed Historian streaming right now? No. Well, chat, we might just end it for right now. But definitely jump back over with us here and about the top of the hour. Be getting back in the swing of things. After the Final Fantasy VII stream, we're going to be rating Faye, and then we're probably going to be coming back here to read some more of your Friday flexes after that. So, with that, chat, I am going to leave you. Have a fantastic break, and we'll see you back here right around 7:45 Central Time, 8:45 Eastern.